I used to believe loyalty actually counted for something. For 15 years I showed up before sunrise, stayed long after everyone else clocked out, picked up the shifts nobody wanted, and handled the quiet tasks that kept the wheels turning. 15 years without a single midnight call demanding, "Where the hell are you?" Because I was always there. After a while, you convince yourself that consistency means something, that all those hours will eventually cash out into respect, maybe even a little recognition. Turns out I was wrong. Today I learned loyalty is invisible until it disappears. My name's Adrian Cole. I'm 41, and until this morning, I held the title of Senior Operations Lead at Sterling Logistics, a logistics outfit. Sounds fancy on paper, but the truth is simpler. I was the guy who kept the whole thing from breaking down. When drivers walked out without notice, I filled the gaps. When clients screamed about late shipments, I was the one to calm them down. When the system crashed at 2 in the morning, it was my phone that lit up, and it was always me who picked up. Always. That morning I sat in the conference room, second row, pen in hand, same as I had 100 times before. The boss strolled in late, as usual, with Natalie trailing right behind, notebook hugged to her chest like she was auditioning for a role. Natalie, the office darling. She could spend hours laughing in the boss's office and still be praised for her drive. She laughed too loudly at weak jokes, tilted her head just so when pretending to care, and somehow sold her endless chatter as excellent communication skills. The announcement came fast, tossed out like it barely mattered. Natalie had demonstrated exceptional promise in leading discussions and boosting morale. Effective immediately, she was the new team supervisor. Polite applause filled the room. Thin, automatic, the kind of clapping people do when they know they're expected to. I clapped too, even managed to smile. 15 years grinding my hands down to the bone, and the crown went to the woman who poured sugar on every word. When the meeting wrapped up, I waited for the crowd around her to thin out, then stepped forward. "Congrats, Natalie," I said, my voice carrying a cheerfulness that almost surprised me. She smiled back, wide-eyed and sweet, like she'd won a jackpot without ever buying a ticket. I handed her the plain white envelope I'd been carrying for 3 months. She didn't know what it was, but the boss did. Her eyes flicked to the letterhead, then back to me, and the color drained right out of her face. "You son of a bitch," she shouted, louder than she meant to. The room froze. Natalie's laugh died in her throat. The intern stared. Someone coughed. My resignation sat on the table between us, neat and final. I stayed silent, just watching, her lips curling back, her hand trembling against the papers she clutched. She wasn't angry about losing me. She was scared, because she knew I hadn't made this choice overnight. I'd been laying the bricks for months, waiting for the day Natalie's performance earned her the prize they never intended for me. And I'd sworn I wouldn't fight for scraps. When that day came, I'd walk away on my terms, and take more with me than they ever expected. I stepped past her without looking back, leaving silence in the space where her authority had just cracked. The others watched me leave, their forced applause still echoing, unsure whether they'd seen a resignation or the opening shot of a war. Even the office looked different when I walked out for the last time. Though really, nothing had changed. Same flickering lights management ignored. Same coffee-stained carpet shaped like continents. Same smell of burnt toner and forgotten lunches. But stripped of purpose, it all looked like a battlefield I already knew by heart. Every flaw, every weakness exposed. The posters about teamwork and synergy read more like propaganda than inspiration. The laughter from the break room wasn't friendship, just nervous noise filling space between deadlines. The whole building had been camouflaged. 15 years I walked through it like a soldier moving through smoke. My name still sat on the doorplate, Senior Operations Lead, backbone of Sterling Logistics. That was the mask I wore. The man who answered calls at 2 a.m., who fixed the jobs no one else would touch, who carried failures that weren't his own. They thought that was all I was, a workhorse too stubborn to stop pulling. But before I ever took that desk, I'd lived another life. I wasn't just the guy keeping trucks on the road. I'd been a contractor in cybersecurity, working with teams that didn't officially exist. My work was hunting breaches, tracking signals, dismantling networks before enemies even realized they were exposed. I was damn good at it, too good, until one mission went sideways, and loyalty turned into something darker. After that, I walked away. No medals, no farewell. Just a quiet exit into civilian life. I promised myself something steady, anonymous, boring. Logistics sounded safe. Ordinary. That's why I chose it. For a while, I almost believed in that simple life. Then Natalie happened. I kept replaying every smirk on her face, every whisper at the boss's door. She thought no one noticed when her mistakes vanished, when botched reports reappeared polished, when deadlines shifted to save her. But I noticed. I was the one staying late to cover her tracks. Not because I liked her, but because letting the company bleed wasn't an option. And every time I cleaned up her mess, she came in smiling wider the next morning, sure the universe would always bend for her. Natalie didn't rise through skill. She floated up on gossip, charm, and a boss desperate for praise. She made weakness look like warmth, turned chatter into insight, and built her climb on blurred lines between rumor and truth. That was her real craft. Not logistics. Not leadership. Manipulation was her game. I never cared about being underestimated. Truth is, I liked it that way. While Natalie strutted around like a puppeteer, I was the one pulling records, not strings. Every email she sent on the company server, I archived. Every office call that passed through the switchboard, I flagged. I tracked every client complaint that somehow vanished from official reports. I even kept recordings, her little private conversations with the boss inside that glass-walled office. She thought those walls kept secrets. To me, they were paper, and I knew where the paper trail was stored. So when I walked out that afternoon, my hands looked empty. But I carried more with me than they ever suspected. They believed I left in defeat, head low, pride swallowed, leaving them to toast their new supervisor. But this wasn't surrender. It was my first move. Because I hadn't been stuck in an office for 15 years, I'd been playing on a chessboard. And I never played a lose. I didn't storm out with slammed doors or fiery speeches. No curses, no threats. Just a plain envelope left behind and 15 years of silence trailing after me. People imagine vengeance as something loud, explosions, shattered glass, broken walls. But the sharpest revenge is quiet. The kind that slips in after everyone thinks the fight is over. That's when it cuts the deepest. Natalie basked in her moment like a queen newly crowned. Within hours, photos of her new title hit social media. Team supervisor at Sterling Logistics. She spread that grin everywhere. Old classmates, forgotten cousins, every rival from high school saw it. She held meetings where her voice carried louder, her posture straighter. She corrected coworkers mid-sentence with that sugar-coated authority that almost made me laugh. And the boss played along, showing her off as the company's bright future. Publicly, it was champagne and applause. Privately, cracks were already forming. Because the truth is simple, I never sabotaged a thing. I didn't need to. All I did was stop being there. And without me, the foundation gave way. Morning shifts I used to cover sat empty. Deliveries missed deadlines. When a driver called in sick, nobody picked up the phone. The automated reporting scripts I'd built, layered, precise, spit out blank pages because no one else ever bothered to learn them. And signed contracts piled up on desks, waiting for a hand to walk them through the chain, a hand that was gone. The little details they dismissed as unimportant were the gears that kept the machine alive. And I knew it wouldn't take long. Neglect always collapses under its own weight. For years, I had patched leaks, braced the walls, and stitched the whole thing together in silence. The boss never saw the work, only the polished results. Natalie thought results came from charm. Neither of them realized that once I walked away, gravity would do the rest. I didn't need gossip or whispers to track the fallout. I had access. Old habits from cybersecurity die hard, and I'd built tunnels years earlier, backdoors masked as security upgrades. Invisible mirrors. So while Natalie strutted at the head of the table, I read her emails as she typed them. I saw the cracks before anyone else did. Clients asking where their shipments were, coworkers griping that she ignored their messages, Natalie sending midnight notes to the boss begging for help with reports she'd never learned to run. Her confidence unraveled in the small details. Short, clipped replies. Misspelled words. Long silences when someone asked a question she couldn't answer. Her hands trembled in front of the room, even if she tried to hide it. I saw it in her rushed corrections, her backpedaled explanations. And the boss? She didn't protect Natalie. She turned on her. First sharp remarks in meetings. Then emails typed in all caps. Finally, venom so bitter the walls could feel it shake. Loyalty flows downward in theory. In practice, when it breaks hard. I could have ended them right there. One wrong inbox, one leaked recording, and I'd have scorched the ground clean. But I didn't. Because patience can cut sharper than a blade. I wanted them to flail, to drown in their own arrogance, to taste their victory, believe in it, savor it, then choke on it as it rotted. Because here's the truth, let people think they've won. That's when they show their throat. The office was cracking apart from the inside. I didn't need to be in the middle of it to hear the breaks. I saw it in the emails. I heard it in intercepted calls. I watched it in timestamps on files, overdue and untouched. Natalie's gossip, the very ladder she'd climbed, became poison. She whispered about alliances that weren't real, stirred suspicion until no one trusted anyone. Her so-called morale was just paranoia in better packaging. Even the boss wasn't immune. I read her midnight messages to Natalie. Why isn't this fixed? Where's the report? Why did I hear this from the client first? Natalie fired back excuses, half-baked promises, hollow reassurances. And then, in daylight, the boss tore into her in front of the whole staff. Voice sharp, cutting deep. Coworkers retreated to the break room, whispering about the fallout, some already hunting for new jobs. Productivity tanked, but no one admitted it. They just kept their heads down, praying the storm would pass. It reminded me of other storms. Years ago, long before Halverson, I saw men I trusted sell out their own squad for a payday. I'd been a contractor then, surrounded by smiles that looked genuine, until bullets started flying from the wrong direction. Betrayal isn't new. It never is. It just changes costumes. Natalie in her pressed dresses, the boss in her tailored blazers. It was the same performance I'd seen before. The same hunger dressed up as professionalism. They thrived on loyalty until it broke, and then they feasted on the wreckage. There were nights I almost blew my cover. Nights when I stared at the files I'd collected, emails proving incompetence, recordings of whispered backroom schemes, logs of every client they had failed, and felt the urge to unload it all. I pictured myself storming back into that office, dropping the evidence on the table, and watching the whole act collapse in real time. I could almost hear the gasps, see Natalie's painted smile dissolving into ash. It would have been easy, too easy, but I didn't. Patience is sharper than rage. You don't cut the rope when your enemy is still dangling halfway down a cliff. You wait until they think their feet are safe on the ground. Then you let it snap. Every time I felt the trigger under my finger, I eased off. Not yet. Not until the noose pulled tight enough. And it was tightening. The company had been chasing a massive client for months. I knew because I'd been the one designing the integration plan, tailoring it piece by piece to their specs. That account was supposed to be my win, the proof of everything I'd built in silence. Instead, in a desperate grab to showcase Natalie, the boss handed her the reins. She would lead the final pitch. I nearly laughed when I saw the memo. Natalie, who couldn't run a basic report without fumbling, would stand in front of executives and claim credit for a system she couldn't even explain. She had no idea what trap she was walking into. Because that presentation wasn't just a victory lap, it was a blueprint I had written with my own hands. Buried deep inside, hidden beneath the polished charts and glossy projections, sat a flaw only the architect would recognize. Natalie thought she held a crown. She didn't see the fire under her feet. The boardroom was dressed for triumph. Polished wood gleamed. A spread of untouched pastries sat waiting. The projector hummed, the opening slide glowing on the wall. Natalie perched at the head of the table, back stiff, lips stretched in a practiced smile that looked more like a mask. The boss hovered nearby, sharp-eyed, proud, like a gambler certain her winning hand was about to be revealed. Across from them sat 6 executives, their suits immaculate, their expressions unreadable, pens poised. It was the kind of room where careers are born or erased in under an hour. I wasn't there in person. I didn't need to be. I knew the rhythm, the choreography. I had built the very stage they stood on, and I knew exactly where the floor would cave. Natalie began with that syrup-sweet confidence she mistook for skill. She gestured to slides, nodded at graphs, let her voice roll with forced authority. The boss nodded beside her, beaming, convinced they had the room in their pocket. For 10 minutes it looked that way. Executives scribbling notes, leaning forward, nodding at the buzzwords she fed them. I almost admired her performance. Almost. Then the crack appeared. A number shifted wrong. a column bending into symbols that didn't belong. Natalie's voice hitched before she forced it steady and clicked ahead. The next slide warped faster, charts curling into nonsense, projections collapsing into zeros, errors spiraling like wildfire across the wall. Natalie jabbed the remote, panic leaking into her eyes. The graphs blinked out. The reports refused to load. The client stopped nodding. Pins froze. Silence fell heavier than an explosion, pressing against the glass walls. The boss leaned down, hissing at her, voice sharp enough to carry. Natalie stammered, hands shaking, promising it was a technical hiccup while she mashed keys that did nothing. The clients exchanged looks. One closed his folder with a snap. Another pushed his chair back, slow and deliberate. Then the lead executive stood, voice flat. "We can't invest in a company that can't control its own data." He walked out. The others followed. Each step carved a deeper crack into the company's foundation. The boss shouted after them, her voice frantic, sharp, desperate, but they never turned back. Chaos swallowed the room. She spun on Natalie, spitting accusations that carried down the hall. Natalie broke, sobbing, mascara streaking, spitting excuses nobody bought. Co-workers crowded the doorway, some slipping off to avoid the blast, others whispering like the building itself had been cursed. No one defended her. No one reached out a hand. The queen of gossip sat stripped and shaking, abandoned at the moment she needed allies most. That's when I entered. No swagger, no gloating, just calm, measured steps into a room suddenly too empty to stand in. I set an envelope on the table, same as the first, but with one new line scrawled across the bottom. Actions have consequences. The boss read it with trembling hands, her breath ragged like she'd taken a punch. Natalie sat crumpled beside her, wide-eyed, silent, staring at ruins she couldn't repair. The air smelled of sweat and panic, the stage littered with the debris of their arrogance. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. They heard me. They thought they buried me. They never realized I was the one writing their eulogy.